In the summer of 2010, self-proclaimed mad scientist Rintaro Okabe and his childhood friend Mayuri Shino went to the Akihibara Radio Kaiken building to attend a seminar on time travel by Dr. Nakabachi. Whilst there, Rintaro meets a girl named Kurisu Mikise, who claims to have met him 15 times before, despite never having met her himself. Later, after receiving a scrambled video message on his phone, Rintaro hears a scream and discovers Kurisu lying on a pool of blood, indicating that she was stabbed to death. Upon sending an email about the situation to his friend, Itaru Daru Hashida, Rintaro feels a strange sensation, before discovering the streets have become vacant and a strange satellite has crashed into the radio building. Later, as Rintaro's future gadget laboratory works on a phone-controlled microwave that turns bananas into gelatinous form, Rintaro is surprised to learn that the seminar he was attending was apparently cancelled, as if it had never taken place. Afterward, as Rintaro and Daru go to a forum being held, Rintaro discovers the email he sent Daru about Kurisu's stabbing had arrived 5 days earlier, before coming across Kurisu, who was alive and well. Surprised to find Kurisu alive, Rintaro was subsequently humiliated by her during a lecture concerning the unlikeliness of time travel. After getting some supplies from the androgynous Luca Urashibara, Rintaro meets Suzuha Amane, who was hired by his landlord, Yugo Mr. Braun Tanoji, as a part-time assistant in his electronic shop. Later, Rintaro investigates the supposedly altered events and learns that a man calling himself John Teeter, who claimed in 2000 that he was a time traveler, has surfaced once more in 2010. Believing this John Teeter to be a fake, Rintaro is shocked to find that all the evidence of Teeter appearing in 2000 has disappeared. The next day, Rintaro encounters a strange woman named Moeka Kiryu, who asks for information on a retro PC model called the IBN 5100, which Rintaro gathers from Daru. Later, as Rintaro and Daru once again experiment with their phone wave, a banana disappears from the oven and appears reattached to its bunch in gel form. At which point, Kurisu arrives at the lab. Rintaro agrees to let Kurisu examine their phone wave on the condition that she becomes one of his fellow lab members. Performing another experiment with the phone wave, which causes a burst of electricity when Mayuri opens it, Rintaro succeeds in sending another email to the past. This leads Rintaro to deduce that their phone wave is actually a time machine capable of sending text messages to the past. As Kurisu leaves the lab in denial, Rintaro hears about the Large Hadron Collider and micro black holes and asks Daru to hack into CERN. Later, after hearing from Teeter about CERN allegedly creating a dystopian future, Rintaro and Daru learn that CERN has been performing top-secret experiments with micro black holes, which have resulted in human deaths. With further information about CERN's time travel experiments encrypted in a code that Daru can't decipher, Rintaro learns from Teeter that he needs the IBN 5100 computer Moeka was looking for to decode it. While out doing his laundry, Rintaro runs into Kurisu, who is still in denial about a time machine existing, and tells her about the IBN 5100. As Kurisu hears from a contact about the computer's capabilities, maid cafe owner Ferris Nyanyan informs Rintaro that her family donated an IBN 5100 to Luca's family shrine. Managing to borrow the IBN 5100 from Luca's father, Rintaro and Kurisu carry it back to the lab. Arriving back at the lab with Rintaro, Kurisu is met with a strange reaction from Suzuha. While the gang gathers parts needed to connect the IBN 5100 with Daru's PC, Suzuha warns Rintaro to be cautious of Kurisu. Using the IBN 5100 to decipher CERN's encrypted files, Rintaro, Daru, and Kurisu learn that various people have been found dead in a gel-like state at various points in time as a result of their experiments. Kurisu deduces that the gelatinous state is a result of matter being squeezed at a molecular level, whilst passing through the micro black hole. Despite the shock of this news, Rintaro vows to perfect the phone wave. Dubbing the messages they send to the past as D-mails, the group conducts further experiments, deducing the rules and limitations of sending D-mails. They learn what time they can send messages, how much data can be sent, and how far they can send them back. The next day, Moeka shows up at the lab to see the IBN 5100 and seeks to borrow it from Rintaro. After failing to hide the nature of their experiments from her, Rintaro ends up making Moeka his 5th lab member. After Daru updates the phone microwave's firmware, Rintaro decides to perform an experiment attempting to change history by sending winning lottery numbers to the past. Upon sending the D-mail, he experiences a sensation similar to the one he had before the satellite crash, discovering no one else was aware that the experiment ever took place. Rintaro finds his D-mail had indeed led to Luca purchasing the lottery ticket, although his own personal error led him to get the number wrong. After a brief encounter with Suzuha, Rintaro deduces that the D-mail had shifted him to a world line in which Luca had bought a lottery ticket and the D-mail experiment never took place, explaining everyone's altered memories. Confused as to why only he can remember the previous world line, Rintaro contacts Titor, who tells him he may have the power to become a messiah and lead the world beyond the 1% divergence point, and hence change the dystopian future. Rintaro explains the nature of the world line shift to Daru and Kurisu and how he's the only one who can remember its changes, an ability he refers to as reading Steiner. As the experiments resume, Moeka requests to send a D-mail, which shifts Rintaro to a new world line, where no one else remembers Moeka. The next day, Luca comes to the lab, asking to send a D-mail before he was born so that it would be born as a girl. Using an urban myth about how a diet can affect a baby's gender before birth, the group sends a D-mail to Luca's mother's pager, sending Rintaro to another world line, although he doesn't notice any obvious changes. As Ferris learns about the phone wave upon overhearing a discussion between Rintaro and Daru, Rintaro discovers that the IBN has gone missing from the lab, which was apparently never found in the first place as a result of Moeka's D-mail. Kurisu deduces that the minor changes to the past that resulted from their previous D-mails have caused a butterfly effect, leading to changes beyond their control. After learning that the IBN 5100 had been previously taken from Luca's shrine, Rintaro finds Moeka in a town and confronts her, only to learn that she doesn't know the whereabouts of the IBN either. Rintaro also discovers that, unlike the previous world line, everyone has met Moeka before in the current one, giving credence to Kurisu's theory. Rintaro and the others later visit Ferris, whose true identity is revealed to be Rumiho Akiha, whose family owns Akihabara. Ferris offers them information on the IBN 5100, in exchange for being allowed to send a D-mail 10 years into the past. Rintaro reluctantly agrees and allows her to send the D-mail, causing him to experience another world line shift. After learning from Ferris's father that they no longer have the IBN 5100 in their possession, Rintaro discovers that the physical geography of Akibahara has completely changed, no longer being a mecca for anime culture. Realizing the D-mail Ferris sent prevented more culture from being introduced into Akibahara, he discovers that Luca's earlier D-mail had in fact changed his sex to female. Afterwards, Rintaro talks with Suzuha, who reveals she came to Tokyo to try to find her father, mentioning she will leave if she's unable to find him the next day. Rintaro then establishes her as a lab member and invites her to the lab for a farewell party. While preparing for the party, Rintaro receives a threatening text message telling him that someone is watching him with a picture of a gelatin thread attached. Later, while shopping with Mayuri, he recalls his reading Steiner ability may have first occurred when he was a child. Later that night, Suzuha sends a farewell text to Rintaro, prompting him to send a D-mail to himself, ordering him to convince Suzuha to attend the party and stay in Tokyo. Rintaro discovers that a CRT television in the electronics shop below the lab has been serving as the lifter from the phone wave, as the D-mails can only be sent when it is on. Kurisu then theorizes it might be possible to send frontal lobe memories back in time through the phone wave, allowing the consciousness of a person to time leap into the past. As Rintaro goes into town with Mayuri to look for parts Kurisu needs, he explains to her that a time leap may be safer to conduct than simply sending D-mails due to the nature of chaos theory, as the D-mails can produce unexpected consequences once sent. They run into Moeka along the way, as well as Suzuha, who tells Rintaro that Kurisu allegedly works for CERN. As Kurisu denies this, she tells Rintaro about the problems she has with her father, who grew up to hate her because she surpassed him in scientific prowess. Later on, when out shopping, Okabe receives another threatening text message with a picture of a severed doll's head attached, causing him to return to the lab, fearing for Mayuri's safety. Later, Daru informs the group that the lab has been connected to the CERN network without them knowing. With the ability to utilize CERN's LHC to compress memories into D-mail size, Kurisu completes her time loop machine, capable of sending one's memories up to 2 days into the past. However, Rintaro, still disturbed by the threatening texts he has received, decides against using the device, suggesting they instead make their discoveries public. As the lab members decide to have a party, Kurisu comes into conflict with Suzuha, who claims she is destined to become a CERN spy in the future. but Mayuri manages to calm things down between them. While a bomb threat is televised, Suzuha, after hearing about the lab's connection to CERN, flees the lab. Led by Moeka, a group of armed men storms the lab, who reveals herself to be a rounder, hired by CERN. She orders Rintaro, Kurisu, and Daru to be detained before shooting and killing Mayuri, whom she deems as not being necessary. Moments after Mayuri's death, Suzuha rushes into the lab and creates a distraction, allowing Kurisu to use the time leap machine to send Rintaro back in time to 5 p.m. the same day. Rintaro drives everyone out of the lab before frantically searching for Mayuri, during which he receives a call from Kurisu, who deduces that he made a time leap. Finding Mayuri, Rintaro attempts to flee with her to the station, only for the trains to have stopped. When they are both approached by rounders, they attempt to flee, but Mayuri is once again killed when she is run over by Moeka's car. Escaping the rounders' clutches and performing another time leap, Rintaro locates Mayuri earlier and escapes to the subway station. However, Mayuri is killed once again when Yugo's daughter, Nei, accidentally pushes her in the path of an oncoming train. Devastated, Rintaro vows to keep leaping into the past until he manages to save Mayuri. As each of Rintaro's attempts to save Mayuri keep failing, he learns from Moeka that the lab was targeted by CERN due to their creation of a time machine and their plan to publicly announce it. Falling into despair over his repeated failures, Rintaro is approached by Kurisu, who gets him to reveal his situation and gives him key trigger phrases to get her past self to cooperate with him. After being sent to just before the time leap machine's completion, Rintaro manages to obtain Kurisu's aid before they're both approached by Suzuha. She explains that to save Mayuri, they need to escape the Alpha World Time Attractor field, where Mayuri is doomed to die due to the converging nature of world lines, and cross the 1% divergence point to the Beta World line, where the outcome might be different. Suzuha then takes Rintaro and Kurisu to the crashed satellite, which turns out to be a time machine, and reveals she is in fact John Teeter, and has come from the year 2036. Suzuha explains how CERN was able to build a time machine and use it to create a totalitarian world in 2036, stating that she had originally planned to travel to 1975 to acquire an IBM 5100, but made a detour to the year 2010 to look for her father. When she tries to start the time machine, she discovers it has broken down, which Rintaro realizes was a result of the storm on the night he stopped her from leaving. Leaving 2 days before the completion of the time machine, Rintaro gathers the lab members to inform them of the situation. While Daru is tasked with fixing Suzuha's time machine, Mayuri suggests that everyone also help Suzuha find her father, using a pin badge he gave her as a clue. Suzuha also gives Rintaro a device called the divergence meter, which keeps track of the magnitude of differences between world lines, and tells him about how he founded the resistance against CERN in the future. After spending the day searching for Suzuha's father, Rintaro is thanked by Suzuha before receiving a lead on Suzuha's father from a badge maker. Unable to get much information about the badge maker's client, Rintaro decides to leap back in time to confront the client in question, only to find it was Daru, who wanted to make a fake badge to cheer Suzuha up. Daru then reveals that Suzuha's time machine is only able to travel backward in time, meaning they won't be able to see her again once she leaves. As the repairs to the time machine are completed, Mayuri deduces from the time machine's name that Suzuha's father is actually Daru. After a short reunion, Suzuha travels back to 1975, though Rintaro notices the divergent meter's reading has not changed. A few hours later, Yugo delivers a letter written by Suzuha in the year 2000, revealing that she had committed suicide a year later. In the letter, Suzuha laments that she had failed her mission, as the damages to the time machine caused her to crash and lose her memories for 24 years. Blaming herself for stopping Suzuha on the night of the storm that damaged the time machine, Rintaro sends a D-mail that stops him from following Suzuha, letting her use the time machine before it was damaged, but making her forget meeting her father. Speaking with Yugo again in the New World line, Rintaro learns that Suzuha had died of illness instead, and receives her divergence meter, which is now showing a different value. Despite the change in divergence, Mayuri's death still takes place, albeit a day later than in the previous world line. Kurisu theorizes that, since negating Rintaro's D-mail stopping Suzuha delayed the attack, undoing the effects of the other D-mails could bring them back to a world line where they have an IBN 5100, allowing them to hack into CERN and delete the records that set them on their trail. After helping her evade a rival gang of RatNet players, Rintaro takes Ferris to the place where her maid cafe used to be, and tells her about the way Akibahara was. This causes Ferris to recall some of her memories from that world line, and the D-mail she sent, a fake ransom note, which prevented her father from boarding a plane, fated to crash. The rival gang catches up to them, but they're rescued by the arrival of Ferris's father. Speaking to him, Rintaro learns that he was forced to sell the IBN 5100 he had to pay for the fake kidnapping's ransom. After accepting the reality of her father's death, Ferris agrees to send a D-mail canceling out the previous one, turning Akibahara back into a Mohub. The IBN 5100, however, remains outside of Rintaro's reach. Rintaro tells Luca about how she used to be a male and urges her to revise the D-mail responsible to change Mayuri's fate. While she initially doesn't believe him, she later agrees to do so on the condition that Rintaro takes her on a date. Despite Kurisu and Daro's advice on dating, Rintaro and Luca spend their date together in an awkward conversation. Like Ferris, Luca eventually recalls the previous world line where she was a male, distressing her as a return to it would prevent her from pursuing her feelings for Rintaro. Before sending the D-mail that would negate Luca's first one, Rintaro realizes that the reason they did not enjoy their date was he was trying to be someone he was not. As a result, Rintaro returns to the shrine and spends the rest of the day training with Luca like they used to. With their relationship repaired, Rintaro sends the D-mail moving back to a world line where Luca is a boy, leaving the next D-mail to be reversed, Moeka's. Arriving at Moeka's apartment only to learn that she committed suicide, Rintaro leaps to an earlier time, finding Moeka to be a nervous wreck due to not having been contracted by a person known as FB, who had given her the orders to find the IBN 5100. Rintaro steals Moeka's phone and sends a D-mail from it, but discovers she had lied about the contents of the message she had sent in the previous world line. Confronting Moeka about FB and telling her about her future suicide, Rintaro finds the offending text, which involved the location of the IBN 5100, but annulling it via another D-mail still did not change the world line. As Okabe realizes he needs to send a D-mail from FB's phone to convince her past self to follow its instructions, Moeka, feeling betrayed by FB for not contacting her, tells him where to find the IBN 5100. Despite Okabe knowing the location of the IBN 5100, Kurisu advises against trying to steal it, instead suggesting that he stake out the location to find FB, with Moeka deciding to join him. As they observe the IBN 5100 being taken out, they follow it as it passed along between several people, including Yugo, before it ends up on a plane bound for France, where CERN is located. Rintaro, Moeka, and Kurisu go to confront Yugo, who reveals himself to be FB, and a rounder who was forced to do CERN's bidding to prevent harm from befalling Nei. Following the code of the rounders for those who fail their mission, Yugo kills Moeka before taking his own life. Rintaro then uses Yugo's cell phone to finally cancel out Moeka's D-mail, returning to a world line where both Moeka and Yugo are alive and the IBN 5100 is again in their possession. As Rintaro gets Daro to hack into the CERN network to erase the data they have on them, he comes to the sudden realization that by doing so, he would have to return to a world line where Kurisu is dead. Not wanting to move to a world line where Kurisu dies, Rintaro decides against the hacking. Too afraid to tell Kurisu the reason behind his change of plans, Rintaro accompanies Mayuri to a comic market, trying to think of a way he can save her without sacrificing Kurisu. As a car appears during Mayuri's fated time to die, Rintaro attempts to change destiny by letting the car hit him instead, but Mayuri pushes him out of the way and dies in his place. As he leaps back in time, Kurisu has Rintaro reveal to her that she dies in the Beta World line. Later, Rintaro finds Mayuri visiting her grandmother's grave, overhearing that she's been having dreams of the time she died and that she has noticed Okabe's suffering. Meanwhile, Kurisu visits the location where she is destined to die in the Beta World line. Kurisu reveals to Rintaro that she recalls her stabbing from dreams, as well as Rintaro's various attempts at saving Mayuri. When Kurisu tells Rintaro that he should save Mayuri over her, he cannot accept it and runs back to the lab. As Rintaro attempts to time leap again, Kurisu stops him, worried that seeing Mayuri die over and over will destroy him. After giving in and choosing to save Mayuri, Rintaro tells Kurisu he loves her, to which she responds by kissing him. The next day, Kurisu prepares to return to America, while Rintaro and the others delete the original D-mail from the CERN network. Just after erasing the data, Kurisu returns to the lab to tell him that she loves him, but is cut off as Rintaro shifts back to the Beta World line. Sometime after getting rid of the phone wave, Rintaro receives a call from an alternate Suzuha, telling him she needs his help to prevent World War III. Suzuha explains that her mission is to prevent Kurisu's death and enter a world line known as Steins Gate, in which World War III never happens. Wanting to save Kurisu, Rintaro travels to the past with Suzuha in her time machine, arriving before Kurisu's death. Witnessing events unfold as they did, Rintaro briefly runs into Kurisu, explaining the prior encounter, before hiding in the room where she will be stabbed. There, Kurisu meets with her father, revealed to be Dr. Nakabachi, who attempts to take ownership of her time travel theory for himself. Rintaro attempts to save Kurisu but inadvertently stabs her himself, allowing Nakabachi to escape with her theory to Russia, an event that will lead to a time machine arms race and eventually World War III. As Rintaro falls into despair and refuses Suzuha's order of a second attempt, Mayuri slaps him, stating that he was never one to give up on someone or something. Suzuha then reveals that Rintaro was intended to fail the first attempt, so that the scrambled video message he received on the day of Kurisu's death could be made viewable. This turns out to be a video from his future self, explaining that the key to saving Kurisu without changing the events that led him to develop the time machine and causing a paradox is to fool his past self into believing Kurisu has died. Picking up a light-up sword to use its liquid as a substitute for Kurisu's blood, Rintaro and Suzuha return to the day of Kurisu's death. To prevent a metal Upa toy that would prevent Nakabachi's paper from being destroyed by an onboard fire, Rintaro obtains it himself, so that Mayuri ends up with a plastic one, which would later make its way to Kurisu and Nakabachi. Finding that the liquid in the gadget has dried up, Rintaro provokes Nakabachi into stabbing him, leading him to run off in fear with Kurisu's theory. After knocking Kurisu out with a taser, Rintaro uses his own blood from his stab wound to recreate the scene he originally saw, fooling his past self and sending him on his time-hopping journey. As Rintaro returns to the present, Suzuha gives her thanks before she disappears, as she does not yet exist in the Steins Gate world line. After recovering from his wounds, Rintaro starts giving out badges to the lab members he recruited in other world lines, saving one for Suzuha, who will be born in 7 years. Later, while walking in the streets of Akibahara, Rintaro has a chance encounter with Kurisu, who appears to have retained some memories of the other world lines. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.